It's recording. Well, good morning. Happy
Morning.
March, everybody. Let's say, Director Dog, I'm hoping that you're keeping the trees warm and the fruit is still going to be plentiful out there for you.
Absolutely. Everything's looking beautiful right now.
Love it. I love it. Well, good morning, folks. We'll get started and get us going, and we'll start with the pledge. If you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you call roll, please?
Thank you. Director Branscombe? Absent Chapman? Absent Gog?
Yes.
Early for Guerrero? Absent Jennings?
Here.
Joyner?
Here.
Lauren?
Here.
Sander? Absent Vice Chair Soon?
Here.
Chair Gallardo?
Here.
And ex officio member Tacker for Benny Paul.
Here.
And I'll let the record show that Director Chapman is here. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. We will begin started with our opportunity for public comment. Do we have any members of the public that'd like to comment on any item that is not on the agenda?
We do have a member of the public who's raised their hand. It's Alan Hirsch from YOLO Mobility. Is it okay if he goes ahead and speaks now?
Please, Mr. Hirsch, go ahead.
Mr. Hirsch, you are live in the Transportation Committee meeting. You have 3 minutes. You're welcome to give your comments now.
Thank you very much. Hello, Josh. Hello, Lauren. My first meeting here. I hope you guys hold your meetings on gallery view so I can see the entire commission on new to SACOG's protocol. And I also have a question. I gather staff is not going to be present slides. If it is, they aren't in the packet. So I assume that slides can be presented ad hoc. So does the public have a right to present visuals as part of their 3-minute presentation? Again, ad hoc, your staff seems to have that privilege. I'm not asking for any extra time, just asking for the privilege to present visuals. As we know that most of our communication is through the visuals and not through the words. So I'm asking whether the public has the same privilege as staff and consultants to present slides at their public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair Gallardo, would you like our legal counsel joining us today to weigh in on that?
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Hello. I just want to clarify that your question is whether you can present slides as part of your comments for today.
Yes.
Okay.
Or in the future.
And in the future. And did you provide those comments or those slides to the committee prior?
I have not, no, but in the past, I have done it in the past. Davis City Council is a very common practice, as Josh will affirm. I was wondering whether what the requirements are, because they're not specified here. So I assume staff does it ad hoc because they are not in the packet. Can the public have the same privilege?
No, they do not.
I'm very disappointed. We should have equal access to the four public, to have an open dialogue with diversity. You should have open access to the commissions, so the commissioners could hear all the views on an equal level, not have some people be privileged staff and the public being at a disadvantage. If you want diversity, all voices should have equal volume. Thank you very much for consideration.
So through the chair, if I may, we have a very similar rule in the city of Lincoln, but what we do allow is for the submission of that slide deck through our city clerk. And that packet, that printed packet, is provided to the council for those speakers. And so, with enough advanced notice, I think the gentleman could do the same thing through us.
Thank you, Director Joyner. And we do the same as well. It's submit it to the clerk in advance and they'll make sure that all the commission members receive it. Thank you. Is there any other public comment for any items not on the agenda?
There's no other public comment.
Then, excuse me, then we will move on. And our next item is our consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda any of the directors would like to pull for further discussion?
Move to approve the consent. Gog.
Second, soon.
Thank you. Is there any public comment for any items on the consent agenda?
There's no public comment on the consent calendar.
Wonderful. Thank you. If you would take a vote, roll call vote, please.
Sure. Director Branscombe, absent. Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero,
Yes.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
Chair Gallardo,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Before we move on to our first action item, we had the opportunity last time to introduce all of ourselves and kind of help the folks that are new. And I think most of us have been here, but I would love to have the staff that's joined us do a quick intro of them also. But I know there's some new faces here. Appreciate if we can do that. And Lynette, you're probably the best orderly person to call them out. So if you wouldn't mind doing that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, happy to do that. You all know myself, of course, and at the office in our YOLO room, if it's okay, I'll just run through who's there that I see on the screen is James Corliss, our executive director, Christina Svensk, our committee lead, and Casey Lazan, our deputy director of planning. And then there's also Eric Johnson, our deputy director of operations. And then on the screen, if you can turn your screens on, staff, if you're able to, we have Destin Foster, who'll be presenting our agenda item number 5. We have AJ Tindick, who will be presenting our agenda item number 9. And we have Renee Handy on board also, who provides our technical assistant, kind of our wizard behind the curtain. So, and then sorry, rounding out, we also have Chris Doherty, who has joined us, and he will be presenting agenda item number 6.
Perfect. Well, thank you. When we get to those items, we'll have them tell us who they are.
Aldo,
can I, first of all, thank you for doing that. I really appreciate last month as you had everybody introduce themselves on the committee, the board members, and it just really, especially over Zoom, much appreciated. I think one staffer at least we didn't get to say hello to is Sam Shelton. Sam will be presenting the item on safety performance measures, and I don't know if we're going to get the weatherman this year again, but it was there's folklore about last year's presentation with Sam Shelton. So anyway, just thanks for doing that, Chair Gallardo. Really, it makes a big difference, as I know you know. So much appreciated.
Yeah, it helps on both sides, so we see the faces when we're not down there physically.
Yeah.
But you have set the bar high for Sam's presentation, so I will be expecting something special.
Sorry,
Okay.
Sam.
Yeah. With that, we'll start on our first action item. It is our state targets for the federal performance metrics, and Sam is our presenter.
Thank you. Again, I'm Sam Shelton, a senior analyst here at STACOG. And I don't actually have a safety presentation for you today, no PowerPoint. What I am instead discussing is a little bit about our target setting and performance metrics process, and asking you to delegate authority to our executive director to help set those targets. I want to walk you through a little bit about why that's important. For those of you on the committee that have not discussed federal performance metrics before, let me describe what those are. There are 3 sets of federal performance metrics that Caltrans helps all the MPOs in the state understand for safety. So those are fatal and serious injuries on our national highway system. It's asset management, such as the condition of our pavement on our roadways and the bridge conditions, and it's performance. So it's mobility, travel time reliability, for truck travel time reliability and congestion those kinds of mobility performance metrics. So 3 sets of performance metrics that we all review and set targets for. So the typical process is that when that data becomes available from the state sets a target based on past trends and reviews it with each of the MPOs for the MPOs to also consider supporting statewide targets or setting our own regional targets. So those targets have different schedules for reporting to the Federal Highway Administration for each of the state DOTs. So for safety, those are annual targets that are set. And for asset management or the other performance metrics, those are on 4-year cycles for setting 2- and 4-year targets. So what really happens is that just considering these performance metrics help us set better policy or programming actions. And that's what we typically talk about when we're talking about performance-based planning, data-driven decisions from our elected officials as they're looking at our long-range planning and programming of federal and state funding. When we typically do have good decisions, as James mentioned before, I've talked a little bit about showcasing a lot of metrics and what that means for our region and how that starts shaping our local planning and regional funding around awards. But what happens though is while we do have good discussions about those metrics and we do look into future avenues for research, typically we don't change a lot of our policy until a lot later on in SACOG's schedule for when we do a long-range plan update or when we do have a funding round award schedule. So there's typically that disconnect between a federal deadline for reporting and setting a target and when SACOG takes action. So what we're recommending today is how to break that cycle. We need to break the cycle of chasing those deadlines and bring those performance metric discussions closer to our policy and programming actions. So what we're recommending today is that the Transportation Committee recommend to the board to delegate authority to our executive director to support statewide targets for federal transportation performance measures. What we're not recommending is the delegating authority to set different regional performance targets. We'd still come back to the committees to do that kind of a discussion if we wanted to take different action from the state. So if you were to make that recommendation, have it approved by the board, what would you see next? Well, you would see performance metrics when we're talking about those long-range planning and programming actions. So for the blueprint, you're going to start seeing those metrics and discussions on the transportation side beginning in April with pavement performance metrics. So you'll see me again in April when we're talking about what do asset management metrics, what do they mean to the 3 pathways for those 3 different styles of growth that we'll be talking about. And then later on for safety and collision projections and travel time reliability and other performance metrics as it comes through our travel demand model closer to May and June. And then later on for the funding round working groups that will be scheduled throughout the year, we'll be bringing those performance metrics for their discussions through the fall of this year and into the spring of next year. So those will be some of the next steps should you delegate authority per our recommendation today. Happy to answer questions about that.
Thank you. Any questions from the directors on this item?
I think I do, Chair, if I may.
Please.
So Sam, one of my concerns here is that delegation of authority and us never seeing this come before us again. One of our roles is oversight. And so I think what I'm hearing from you is that even if we delegate that authority, different committees will see this again as we move forward. Is that right?
That's correct. And in addition to just seeing, say, one chunk of performance metrics, you'll see more of the performance metrics talked about together and how they interact, especially when we're talking about each of the pathways and especially the funding round when we start getting into how they interact. For instance, safety and pavement together when we make investments that can improve both performance metrics. You don't really get that kind of a discussion if it's just a safety target setting discussion that's connected to a Caltrans or FHWA deadline for reporting. This action today will help you have better conversations.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item?
I have a question.
Please go ahead, Director.
You know, the sources and methods of scoring projects and drawing conclusions from those scores is sometimes controversial. And last year, or actually maybe the year before, I had one clear example of that, where we were looking at a project in Sacramento County and Rancho Cordova. And when we looked at what the safety issues were along that roadway, and we looked to, you know, sheriff's data and CHP data, there were a certain number of deaths and accidents, et cetera. And there was an insurance database, I think, that's kept of accidents on roads and what's dangerous. And that was accessed and looked at for like city internal purposes. But when that project moved to SACOG, SACOG was using a state-run database that sort of had some obvious errors in it and like excluded accidents that resulted in fatalities from they just weren't there for some reason. And that doesn't surprise me, knowing state databases. But those sorts of things worry me in terms of, you know, choices we make about data sources and the means of evaluation. And there can be such great variance. I remember having a conversation once with the CEO in Rancho Cordova, and I said, it's so great you've got your, you know, 1,100 employees here. And he said, we don't have 1,100 employees, we have 1,400. I said, oh, really? Did you staff up recently? Because that's the number right out of the state database for your number of employees. He's like, well, yeah, but that was about 6 or 8 years ago. So, I mean, some of these things are so far out of date. It is really scary or so erroneous. So that frankly is a big worry. I mean, I'm a scientist. I'd like to get as hard of a number and as best of a number as possible. Or if you can't get that, then you take a bunch of sources and you add them together to try to, you know, ferret out the errors. So in this whole process, that's just a concern I have. Can you comment on that at all?
Sure. With respect to safety performance metrics, any of the state or federal databases about fatal and serious injuries, they start at the local level, reported by city police departments that go into a statewide database managed by the CHP. And that's also accessed by other institutions such as UC Berkeley with their SafeTrack system to try to georeference all of those collisions and share out those collisions. I understand there will be differences, especially when you're looking at, say, Caltrans databases that have different focuses when it comes to their roadway and highway collisions and their causes, such as time of day or the weather, right, or whether it's DUI related. So it doesn't surprise me that there will be differences between all of these databases and how they're reported. But I believe that our funding rounds and the staff that do manage them do promote access to other data to share in those applications. So I think understanding the more well-rounded picture will help out a lot too. But
yeah, in that particular case, the applicant was basically told, you know, we only look at, I think maybe it was the Berkeley database. We only look at that Berkeley database. We can't consider anything else. And even if the Sacramento County Sheriff is saying, look, 3 fatalities here, it wasn't in the Berkeley data, therefore it doesn't exist.
I'm not familiar with that particular project and the response, but I'm happy to follow up with the funding round program manager that reviewed that project.
Yeah, it's been years. We probably don't need to cover that again. It's just a concern I have. And, you know, the more insight I could get into how we make those decisions, probably the better.
You're not the first to bring this up. I believe Director Branscombe also mentioned it about highway data in Marysville. So this is not a new issue, but thank you for bringing it up again.
Director Sander and Chair Gallardo, if I could weigh in on this, maybe a little bit of background, and then I just want to make a comment on your observation, Director Sander. So just to kind of step back for a second, these federal performance measures really came into being in 2012 with the passage of MAP 21, the big federal transportation authorization bill. Before that, the feds basically gave money to states and they gave money to metropolitan regions like ours, right? And said, generally speaking, here's the eligibility, here's the facilities you can spend it on, go forth. And with the beginning of 2012 MAP 21, they began to say, actually, we want to see the needle move. We want to know what we're getting for our investment. And I'm sure I'm being way overly simplistic here, but the fact of the matter is we have not been very good about data-driven decision-making in the transportation industry. I'm not talking just about in our region, just in general. And so the move to these performance measures, and Sam outlined all of them, including the safety measures, has really picked up speed. There are so far no consequences, and Sam, I want to check that and make sure I'm right still. There are no consequences for not meeting those performance measures, but in other words, Sam went through them all from a federal level, but I wouldn't be surprised if we begin to see some, right? Sometimes it's a narrowing of eligibility, or if you have a safety issue, your fatalities are going up, you've got to spend more on safety, that kind of thing. I'm somewhat familiar with some of the differences in some of the safety databases, Director Sander, because there have been some different ones, and it has caused problems. But I want to urge all of us to think about this collectively as a region. As Sam said, we entered the blueprint, we entered the pathways, we think about data and real-time data. One of the things you're going to see is pavement condition, right? So you can all maybe try to claim the worst streets in the region or California. Some of you do. But we are actually doing quite a lot of work right now with a lot of your local staff and public works directors to actually have some software that looks at pavement condition across the region. And my plea is that's really on us. So I just got a little bit of a preview this week of that database. It's really cool and interesting. It's very visual, right? So when one of your jurisdictions says we have the worst streets in the region, we can finally actually begin to claim prizes, and hand out trophies. But partly that's on us, right? Partly that's on us actually filling that data in and beginning to sort of smooth it out and make sure it's consistent and we use the same kind of criteria. And I know of your the differentiation, Director Sander, in these databases. I like Sam would be, and maybe that point has passed. Your point is the larger one of making sure that we don't have missing data, we don't have conflicting databases. But generally speaking, there is more of this to come, right? And more of it will be required of us. But really, if we're going to be data driven, there's more of it that we need to do ourselves to make sure we have good, consistent data across the region.
Thank you. I can tell you that my goal is to not have the worst roads in the region. I appreciate the input. Any other comments or questions from the committee? All right. Well, this is an action item.
Chair Gallardo, we do have a public comment on this item. Would you like them to speak now?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Our commenter is Alan Hirsch with YOLO Mobility. Mr. Hirsch, you are in the meeting and you're welcome to make your comment now. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. We want our government to be accountable, and we want them to move quickly to reflect the current values. So I'm a supporter of this change. You guys have monthly meetings, and you're all part-time. You don't have time to dig deeply. So I believe delegating staff that basically bringing the metrics in that the programs, which are slow-moving and 25 years out, in quick congruence with the values and the metrics is really important. So I support Sam and the SACOG staff in doing this thing. And I give you the example of our inability to basically address the housing crisis. We have had laws and metrics on the book to have affordable housing for years, but bringing our city policies in congruence with these goals have fallen short because we haven't had a fast enough turnaround cycle to bring our actions in congruence with our values. And that's the housing crisis we're in now because we were in anticipation. And we have the same thing with climate. Caltrans has said they need to raise Highway 37, across the Marin County, San Pablo Bay, 20 feet to address climate change. We've seen this coming for a long time. It's going to be a long time. So we need to move quickly to address climate change and as one metric, VMT, because there are other metrics. So I urge you to vote in support of this resolution by Sam and the SACOG staff.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Lynette, do we have any other public comment?
There's no other public comment.
Thank you. We'll close public comment and I will come back to the committee and look for a motion.
Joyner moves approval.
Jennings will second.
Thank you, Director Joyner and Director Jennings with the second. Lynette, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Director Branscombe, absent. Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Move on to item 5, which is our 2023 Regional Active Transportation Program funding recommendation, and Dustin Foster will be our presenter.
Thank you, Director. Could the clerk or the chair please let me know if you're seeing, just a moment, my slideshow, but not my presenter slides with my notes.
Yeah.
So
Oh, no, we want the notes.
Thank you, directors. Good morning. Again, my name is Dustin Foster. I'm a planner on the SACOG transportation team. Today, staff are asking you to recommend the SACOG board to approve by resolution the 6-county 2023 Regional Active Transportation Program recommendations. This is a long one, and contingency list. Authorize the executive director to develop the ATP transmittal documentation to submit to the CTC, and direct staff to prepare the required MTIP amendments. So again, all that's to say, we have a funding recommendation for the 2023 regional ATP. The Active Transportation Program is the primary source for funding projects that increase walking and biking trips and improve safety for people walking and biking throughout the state. But there is both a state competition and then a regional competition on which I am presenting today. So first, just a quick bit of background we provide on the state and regional ATP processes when we present on them. So I presented on this in November, you may have noticed. So this is a sequential grant program. There are 2 opportunities to be successful. First at the state round, where projects competed and applied in June of last year. And then at the regional round, where projects were due in September of last year. This program has oversight by the state CTC and Caltrans, but we have a little bit of flexibility in developing the regional criteria and the application. So applicants can apply to the state and compete according to the state application and scoring rubric. If they're successful, they'll be removed from the regional ATP round if they applied to that one as well. Of particular note, this cycle, the state budget added an unprecedented amount of money, $1 billion, to fund projects between the 4 fiscal years of the program. That's 23-24, the next fiscal year, through 26-27. So this increased the state round to $835 million, and the regional agencies program share is increased to $683 million. The regional ATP was therefore the largest call in its history at $45.5 million. This round more than quadruple our last round and more than double our usual round. So just to put that a little in perspective and just to add up, due to that unprecedented level of state funding, between the state ATP funding, which again I had presented in November 2022, where we were awarded 8 projects to a tune of $83.68 million. 26 of projects in our region applied, and as I said, 8 of those were funded. The regional ATP funding, we're distributing 45.512 with the recommended list before you today. 25 projects competed in this cycle in total. So between both these programs, $129 million, just over, will be invested in our region to improve walking and biking. So that's really transformative and just really great opportunity for us throughout the region. So regional ATP projects in consideration, again, we're awarding $45.512 million. 25 projects competed for a total request of 110, almost 111 million. Now, despite extra funding, what you're seeing here, right, is this was still a highly competitive round. We had we received more than double in requests than the capacity that our round could still offer this time. So just to go over a bit of the regional ATP process, just to ensure that we did this accountably, transparently, and followed the process that you had approved actually last April with the framework. Please refer to attachment E for the framework, excuse me. Which we really followed to the key throughout the process. And attachment F provides details of the process that I'll really be going over for this slide. So the process really started last year in earnest with the regional ATP team. Now that is a partnership that has been successful for many cycles. Every cycle we've done this program. So we had staff at EDCTC, PCTPA, and SACOG all involved. They were helping us develop the framework. They helped us update the application, scoring rubric, and instructions. And then and they also helped providing technical assistance to the agencies in their regions and their counties, or in EDCTC's, actually both cases, they're part of their counties that are under their control. After applications were submitted, the regional ATP team staff screened all of those projects to ensure they met the eligibility requirements, and all 25 projects passed the screening. So that next really important pillar of the process is the regional ATP working group. So please refer to attachment D for the agencies and roles of the members of that working group. At some point in the summer of last year, we requested volunteers and asked for folks to recommend potential members. Between that list of volunteers and recommended members, we formed a group of 7 reviewers. So that would be 4 reviewers as well as a reviewer from each EDCTC, PCTPA, and SACOG, as well as 2 alternates who would review projects in case a reviewer had a conflict of interest, such as they were one of the agencies who applied for funding this round. This regional ATP working group was multidisciplinary. There were professionals with a wide range of professional experiences and expertise. We had folks representing all 6 counties, different agencies. We had non-governmental groups. I facilitated the working group as a non-voting member, really just coordinated meetings, leading discussions, make sure we followed the process, and really made sure that we supported applicants and this working group who's really volunteering a lot of their time over the last couple of months to make sure this is successful. Really we had discussions that are just really important. Working group members really let me know that, the most valuable aspect of this group was actually hearing from others, during these meetings. Folks have different lenses that they bring to the conversation. Folks uncover things in these meetings that others hadn't. Details that some can, say an engineer might be able to understand certain details, or a public health professional might focus on engagement or different things. So it's really important to have those folks and to have them listen to each other, and from there really having a discussion focused on the process, focused on the project performance and how these projects scored against the scoring criteria and the rubric for the program. So just a little bit more on the process. We met over November, December, and January, and we reviewed about 1/3 of the projects in each meeting. At the conclusion of those meetings, actually, they would provide questions for the applicants that I would then share to the applicants for them to reply to the questions in case that would help the reviewers score the projects better. After the 3 meetings, we requested preliminary scores from the working group. These were compiled. And what we do is actually we have 7 people review each project, but we remove the highest and lowest average score, really trying to remove some of that subjectivity. And then we take the average of the middle 5. So we find that is a real good way to hone in on what the group really, how the group scored these projects. The regional ATP team then took those preliminary scores for the 25 projects and noted a kind of a sheer cutoff between the projects scoring in the middle 70s and the project in the lower 70s and into the higher 60s. And they proposed that we would have a follow-up discussion to discuss those top 11 projects that scored in the middle 70s or higher. The working group members, all agreed to that. They thought that would be a valuable effort to look at those 11. We discussed them all. Folks really, again, honed in on scoring criteria and, where they felt like the average may have deviated a bit from where they felt the score should have been. Real detailed discussion, folks to really focus on the scoring criteria and the scoring rubric and making sure that we really got this right. We then allowed a rescore of those 11 projects, and that provided a ranked list and the ranked list that you see before you today. So for the funding recommendation, the top, one more there. For the funding recommendation, the top highest scoring projects were approved by the group. That got us to about 45 million, 43 of the 45 million, leaving around 2.4 million left for the remaining projects. We really discussed it in the working group, determined that that 9th scoring project, it could still be fully funded, but that would only leave a partial fund to the 10th highest scoring project. And the group really agreed to that and formed a consensus around that decision. We reached out to the agency, City of West Sacramento, on that 10th award, the partial funding request, and they agreed, and they determined that they could still get through the right-of-way phase, so they could complete, the first 2 phases, the engineering of the right-of-way phase, with that award. And then we also had to make sure that we met our disadvantaged community benefit target of 40 to 60%, which we analyzed that the proposed recommendation of 45.5 million would meet that benefit with offering about 44% to projects that were found to provide a meaningful benefit to disadvantaged communities. And the meaningful benefit per our scoring rubric was averaging an 8 or above in that category, which was kind of determined to be strong. So the projects that average an 8 or above, were found to not only just be identified as a potential disadvantaged or underserved community or a SACOG EJ community, environmental justice community, but also that the project applicants were found to really do meaningful community engagement with those residents to ideate and to propose the project and move it forward. So again, 44% there. So refer to attachment A for the ranked list that I just discussed, and the contingency list. Again, the top 10 projects were awarded, 9 fully funded, 1 partially funded. We include the contingency list of all the other projects. That partially funded request is at the top, and all of the projects scoring lower than that sequentially down. This is included in the event any project on the funding recommendation is not able to receive the funding award. That is very rare that occurs, but in some cases it does. And then for more details on each project, refer to attachment B, which provides scopes and project strengths. All these projects, all 25, had strengths, but unfortunately, with a program this competitive, you have to nearly score well in every category in order to be funded. So again, we're really constrained by the state in the way that we award these projects. We have to award the project and the funding request amount that they request. We can't really deviate from that, and we have to go down the list, 1 through however many projects we can get through that we can fully fund that, or that we can provide in that staff recommendation of 45. So really, this list that you see before you, it meets those goals. It meets many of the goals that you set forth, and it followed that process that you approved with the funding recommendation. Again, this is the 4 times the size of the last project. but the last round, but still a competitive process that we're only able to award 10 of 25, or about 40% of applicants. But with that 45 million, we're able to really increase that investment in biking and walking projects across the region to nearly 62 with that figure there at the bottom of the screen. Just some detail on investing in underserved community or meeting that disadvantaged community benefit. Here's just kind of over the history of the program. We've really been successful in every time really hitting the state requirement of 25%. This cycle we were asked and you approved to align our regional target investment of 40% with the Federal Justice 40 initiative. And then we set a regional aspirational goal of 60%, which is, you know, as you have seen here in some of our previous rounds, we had achieved that percentage. So with this round, this funding recommendation provides 44% to projects that provide that meaningful benefit. We met the goal with this recommendation. It's, you know, a bit lower than our average, but in terms of a total dollar amount, it's $19.9 million and some really great projects in these communities. So some upcoming milestones. If you approve the staff recommendation today, we will move forward for approval at the board on March 16. We'll present, and if approved, Chair Kennedy would sign the resolution. We are, you know, currently working with CTC and Caltrans, sharing all required materials and submitting the package for their review and concurrence to make sure we're following their process and that everything is eligible, all the projects are eligible. And then they will move forward with approval. It actually could be at one of their next 2 meetings. So we'll stay tuned on that. You know, something we offer after every round is we share the comments with all applicants not awarded. We offer to debrief with applicants not awarded. Those conversations actually, you know, are already starting from folks that had not been awarded. You know, we're really here at SACOG to strategize for future funding opportunities. So please feel free to contact me or anyone else here on the transportation team, whether it's Christina Svensk or Chris Doherty. And, you know, there's my contact information there at the end. I got 5 thank yous. Thank you number 1 is to applicants for putting in the effort. It was, you know, really encouraging to see just the sheer amount of awesome projects coming out of the region. Number 2, it's for the working group. You volunteered a great amount of time to ensure this process was transparent and accountable. You were really invested, and I appreciate you for that. Number 3 is the regional ETP team, staff at EDCTC and PCTPA. You've been partnering with us since the very beginning, and you're consummate professionals as usual this time, so I appreciate that. The 4th thank you, SACOG staff. Many SACOG staff across the agency supported this effort. And then finally, thank you to the directors for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, thank you. I have a hunch we'll have a couple questions here, so I will open it up to the committee. And are there questions from any of the directors? Oh, you must have been way more thorough than I expected to see some hands up here. I have one for you, and I think you hit it, but I just want to confirm. So there was no opportunity to do a partial match kind of funding to extend the money to say, hey, we fund 75% and the jurisdiction puts in 25. If I understood you correctly, that wasn't an option.
No, unfortunately, we really don't have that discretion. You know, we really have to take the applicant's request now, and we have to fund that full request all the way down. Really, the only point at which we can start talking about partially funding that request is when you get to the bottom of the list that you can fund. So, you know, in which case, you know, you would, you know, if they provided a partial project request, we did allow that. So if the funding capacity could offer that, we could do it. Or what is more likely and occurred in this case, we would just partially fund one of the earlier phases of the project to get it going and moving forward, and still help it to be successful in future funding rounds such as ATP or other regional, state, or federal funding sources.
And so then with the partial would have been, if you funded all these projects and you have this much left, then okay, what could we do a partial project out of that? That's how you determine.
Absolutely. And it goes to the project, that's ranked there, and we have to work with the staff at that agency to figure out, what would make sense with that funding award.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Excited to see some opportunities there. If no further questions from our directors, then I will open it up for public comment. Annette, do we have any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Excuse me. All right, we'll close. Oh, wait,
sorry.
I see Director Soon's hands up. You can
Yes.
be the public comment.
No, Chair Gallardo, I'll wait till public comment's done. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I think we don't, pardon me, no public comment. So we will close it and go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to quickly comment, and first of all, thank you, Dustin, for the presentation and all the work from the committee that they put into this. I just want to make a comment about how we often obviously spend a lot of time talking about fixing potholes and expansion projects and road projects, but I got to say it's just equally pleasing to see so many applications for active transportation projects. I think it really complements our region, what we need. And obviously it's disappointing that not all of them can be funded, but it's just nice to see that everybody here in the region, we've got a whole slew of active transportation projects ready to go. And so I look forward to, progressing this and our regional trail network going forward. So with that, I'd be honored to make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Director Soon. Do I have a second?
Dante seconds.
Thank you. Well, I just the same. I'm so appreciative of the hard work that everyone put into this. And of course, we'd like to see everything funded, but oh my goodness, this is a massive investment, and we will absolutely see some really, really fantastic projects come out of there. So thrilled to do that. Thank you. Motion and second. Lynette, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Director Branson, absent. Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yeah.
Joyner,
Aye.
Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Hi.
Motion carries.
Well, congratulations all. That's very exciting. Well, thank you. We're going to move on to our information items. And our first item, item 6, Chris Stotry will be sharing with us.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Chris Doherty, I'm the program manager for the grants and funding programs here. The item before you is a brief update on the 22-23 regional funding round. We received applications last month, and I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of background on the programs and the applications we received. The framework and the programs for this round were carried forward from the previous funding round for 2021. That was adopted by the board earlier 2022. The funding for these programs generally comes from a mix of state and federal sources that we combine into these programs to fund the transportation programs. And the programs that we're referring to here in the regional funding round are 3 primary programs. That is the Community Design Program, the Maintenance and Modernization Program, which are generally transportation projects that are sub $5 million, and the Transformative Program, which are generally any capacity increasing project and any project over $5 million. So we brought forward a budget to be approved at the April 2022 board meeting, and the board approved approximately $130 million budget for this funding round to fund those 3 programs. Later on that year in October, last October 22, we brought forward a set of program guidelines and asked the board to adopt those programs so we could do a call for projects, which was done. And also at that time, because of the outreach that we had been doing through all of our 4 county partners, because of the amount of the funding round, and in that feedback, we heard overwhelmingly that the majority of the needs for our region from our jurisdictions was for maintenance and modernization programs. We recommended to the board to focus more on maintenance modernization program and limit the transformative program to about $28.5 million. And that distribution of the budget was approved at the same time as the program guidelines moving forward. So then in November, we released a call for projects. And in combination of January and February, we received approximately 83 projects through all the programs. 24 of those were through the community design program for a little over $30 million. The maintenance and modernization program received 43 applications, although since the drafting of this report and the action you just took, you funded one of those projects. So now we have 42 applications to review. So thank you for that. We received 18 applications for the transformative program for a total of $170 million in projects. Currently, we've assembled our review committees, and they are made up of both internal SACOG staff and external staff from your jurisdictions around the region, and they're reviewing those applications now. There is also an engineering review that is happening, and that is made up entirely of external engineering staff from your jurisdictions moving forward. We anticipate those reviews to be completed this month, and then we'll be bringing forward a set of recommendations to the Transmission Committee and to the board in May for your adoption. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? All right, see none. This is just an information item, so I appreciate that the presentation. We'll look forward to the next update.
Chair Guy, although it looks like our ex officio member Tacker that she has a comment she'd like to make.
Well, thank you.
I would, and I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand on my thing so fast. So I raised my virtual hand, physical hand as well. Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to mention that we understand at Caltrans this cycle of funds was very limited in the funding amounts, and we appreciate the transparency provided by the SACOG staff and the board over the past few months. Dividing the current pot of funds is very difficult with the region's needs that we currently have. In regards to the transformative category, that category received 50% of the funds that were actually requested. 340 million is what I added up based upon what was requested. The projects in this category, of course, are very large and complex, but they're very needed for the region, which is growing. So this is not a question for this funding round, but for the future funding round working group is what are we going to be doing collectively to start looking at a more global perspective, because the $28 million in transformative definitely falls short in moving the needle for the Sacramento region and its projects. If we stay on track, the projects that are needed in the Sacramento region will definitely fall short. And I want to say that we have a great partnership with the SACOG board and SACOG staff, and I think we all want the same thing. So I look forward to working together on the next funding round to make sure that we're able to fund the projects that are much needed for this region.
Thank you. Appreciate that input. All right, well, we are going to move forward on to our next item, and it is we're item 7, and Christina.
Sorry, Chair Guy, do you mind if I just want to put a little, maybe a finer point on what ex officio member Tacker was just saying there. And she said it very well, which is, you just went through the ATP recommendations, right? And you saw we were oversubscribed by twofold. And this, I think, I appreciate Director Tacker, your for the next funding round and what comes after this, because it is one of those cases of limited resources, right, and many needs. And so that is where we have to make some really important kind of policy decisions. And again, obviously it used to be for the heretofore the 4 counties with this funding round, going forward to 6. But if you remember, we had these discussions around the transformative category and the maintenance and modernization category. And we sort of joked earlier about who has the worst roads. And many of you can claim credit for that. So this kind of trade-off, right, between transformative and maintenance is going to be one of the many that we have to struggle with, as we have done in the past. Also understanding how do we make sure we truly benefit disadvantaged communities, as Dustin was describing earlier in ATP. We knew, and you took the action on limiting transformative to 25% because the funds were overall so small. And we're now very oversubscribed in that category. So we're going to be, there is no way, given just the math on that we're going to fund anywhere near the amount, right, of the requests that come in. So that is one of the many dynamics you'll see working through the review process and coming back to you in May. All right, so I just want to prepare you all for that, right? As you go through this kind of 4-county funding round, with this category in particular, it is more oversubscribed perhaps than I've seen any one category in recent history. But that is in a nutshell, I think it sort of embodies the challenge we have around, maintenance versus capacity, small projects that make a big difference between large projects that have regional benefit, right? So I want to make sure you all were tracking that because it is so incredibly oversubscribed, and we knew it would be, but it is, there will be more people not getting, more agencies not getting funded under the program than are, by far. Okay.
Thank you, James. Appreciate the input. All right, now we'll move on to our next item, which is the update on the YOLO managed lanes, and Christina is going to be our presenter.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, directors. So we're going to provide a quick update for you today on one of the larger, more visible projects in our region, the YOLO 80 Managed Lanes project. So what we're hoping is that this will complement the board workshop that's coming up in a few weeks during the board meeting, where we're going to dive into this a little bit more as a topic as a whole. But wanted to kind of preface that with a local example that's moving along, that's received quite a bit of funding at the federal level as well as state level, and give an update on what's happening there. So many of you are familiar with this project, but this is a 17-mile segment along YOLO 80 from the Solano County line up to the Sacramento County line through YOLO County. It has received significant funding. There was an infra award a few years ago from the federal government to the tune of $86 million, I believe, which was huge. And they continue, Caltrans and YCTD continue their partnership to try to find funding to fill in the gap to complete that project. So right now, the project is in the environmental phase, PA and ED, and they're moving along with that. And if construction, once funding is received, is scheduled to start in summer of 2025 and end in fall of 2027. So, this project, generally speaking, as I've mentioned, is a managed lanes project that's going to look to reduce congestion, increase transit and other multimodal opportunities along the corridor, and is really a safety project in many ways as well. There's a lot of cut-through traffic to avoid the congestion that occurs on 80 on other more localized roads. So there's a lot going on with this project. It is truly important. And so we've asked Autumn Bernstein, the executive director of YCTD, to be here today and provide a PowerPoint presentation and an update on this project for you. So I will turn it over to Autumn.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. And thank you, Madam Chair and directors, for allowing me to be with you. I am recovering from a cold, so if I sound a little throaty, apologies. I do have some slides I want to share. Before we do, I just want to acknowledge we've got 3 of our fantastic YOLO TD board members here today: Josh Chapman, Dante Early, and Jesse Lauren. And the YCTD board has played a really instrumental role, I think, in kind of moving this project forward. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of kind of what's happened over the last 18 months as we've really grappled with what is a way to move this project forward in a way that really aligns with our values. So with that, I think Renee has got the slide deck and we'll go ahead and get started. Great. So we're going to, as Christina mentioned, we're going to be talking about the YOLO Causeway. And I don't think anybody on this board hasn't had experience sitting in the congestion on this freeway. So I think you know the area I'm talking about, but that's the visual. It is basically a bridge over the low point in the Sacramento Valley, and a very unique structure that has not been touched for many, many years. Next slide. So my name is Autumn Bernstein. I'm the Executive Director of the YOLO Transportation District. We oversee daily operations of the YOLO bus. We also do countywide transportation planning and funding coordination and collaboration with our partners here at SACOG, as well as state agencies and federal partners, really to address the mobility challenges here in Yolo County. Next slide. I wanted to just start with our values, because I think when we talk about this project and some of the efforts that we're taking to kind of really push the envelope with regard to pricing and congestion pricing, for us, it comes back to our values. And that's where the board's leadership has been so important. So I just want to touch on the middle column here in terms of what we value as an organization: being transparent, inclusive, and accountable, addressing inequities and improving outcomes for our most vulnerable communities, environmental sustainability and climate resilience, and then responsible stewardship of our public funds. So that's really, I think, those core values that have been driving our work towards re-envisioning how we design congestion relief on this corridor. Next slide. So a bit of just background on the project need. This is a bottleneck for cars, transit, and freight 7 days a week. It's the only east-west crossing of the YOLO bypass, which is giant flood control infrastructure for Northern California. 200,000 cars and 12,000 trucks per day. Really, the goods movement piece cannot be overestimated. This is just such an important corridor going both ways for our economy, for goods and people, between the Sacramento region and the Bay Area region. This really is the connector. And for those reasons, it's been designated one of 12 priority projects for the Northern California mega region. That's SACOG, MTC, and San Joaquin Council of Governments. And for us here locally, it's also really important in terms of really improving transit reliability and bicycle safety. We do have, a lot of bicyclists that do traverse this corridor, believe it or not, using the bike path adjacent to the freeway. And we have safety issues on both ends in West Sacramento and Davis on the approaches that we want to address. And of course, getting people across the causeway on transit is also important, and our transit vehicles sit in traffic as well, just like cars and trucks. Next slide. Christina alluded to this, but I just wanted to share. This is the project map. So it's Interstate 80 all the way through Yolo County, county line to county line, and also the segment of Highway 50 in West Sacramento after the interchange. So the goal is to really address this entire corridor across the river on the Sacramento side. Next slide. So quick facts, Caltrans and YOLO TD are partners in delivering this project. It would add one new traffic lane each way from Sacramento County to Solano County. No widening of the existing causeway structure. That's important. Again, this is basically a land bridge across an environmentally sensitive area. And so it would be an order of magnitude much larger project if we were to think about actually widening the causeway itself. It is partially funded by a federal infra grant to YOLO TD. And really the key question we've been grappling with is what type of lane should it be? And that's really what I want to get into here. So next slide. The board identified a set of goals in 2021 as we thought about, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And I won't go through all of these, but, relevant to this group is the final goal, establishing a highway management system that can be replicated and integrated region-wide. We know that the SACOG MTP has talked about the need to move towards congestion pricing. And so we thought, hey, if we're the first project out the gate here, how do we make sure that we're really doing something that's very thoughtful and that allows for regional replicability? As well, there's a goal here around increasing coordination with Solano County, Caltrans District 4, and MTC. As you know, congestion pricing is happening already in the Bay Area. And in fact, there's lanes under construction in Solano County, just across the county line from us. adding a new express lane there. And so we really want to be thinking about how are we, thinking not just as Yolo County, but thinking about the Sacramento region and those connections down to the Bay Area. Next slide. So we started by asking the question, if we just widen the highway and just add another lane, is that going to work? And our friends at UC Davis, came to our board and gave a presentation reminding us that increasing highway capacity is unlikely to relieve traffic congestion over the long run due to the phenomenon of induced travel, meaning that people change their behavior, land use patterns change when we widen the freeway. And so if we just are widening the freeway, it's unlikely to really achieve our long-term goals around traffic congestion. Next slide. So the next question is, would a carpool lane work? Would that solve our problem? Well, we started digging into the data, and we found that 40% of our carpool lanes here in California are congested during the afternoon commute. Of those, about 40% are severely congested. And these are the afternoon numbers, but it's the same in the morning. What we've seen is a real degradation of our carpool lanes over the recent decades to the point where they essentially function as general purpose lanes, that we're just not able to get to address congestion on our busiest corridors. And indeed, Caltrans preliminary analysis of the YOLO 80 finds that a carpool lane would be congested on the day it opened. So if we're going to spend this much money to build a new lane on this stretch of highway, why would we build a carpool lane if it doesn't seem like a carpool lane is going to be able to address the level of congestion that we currently have? Next slide. So that got us looking at express lanes. An express lane, of course, is a freeway lane that is free for some users and priced for others. It's dynamic pricing, which means that traffic keeps moving. In other words, as there's, traffic increases and more people are trying to use the lane, the price goes up. And what that does is it allows you to optimize the lane by having, so you have, traffic moving. Generally, they're managed for 45 miles an hour is the goal. And so as a result, it actually performs better at managing congestion than a general purpose lane or a carpool lane, because again, you're using, pricing signals in order to regulate flow. So you can actually have more vehicles flowing in a congested corridor when you put a price tag on it. And it also creates a revenue stream that can be invested to meet other goals. And that was an important consideration for us. And so we'll talk a little bit about what some of those goals are. Next slide. So we know that freeways here in California and really nationwide, you can track the development of the freeway system based on who has or had political power at the time the freeways were built. And so what we saw is that they were disproportionately built in low-income Black and brown neighborhoods, because living adjacent to a freeway does bring impacts: air quality, public health, property values, cut through traffic. These are all very real impacts that come from living adjacent to a freeway. And as a result, during the freeway building era, communities of privilege, white communities that were successfully blocked freeways from going through their neighborhoods, while communities that had less political power were stuck having freeways going through their neighborhoods. And so we still see that today in terms of property values, in terms of asthma rates. We know that communities that have a high level of freeways and high level of freeway capacity have negative impacts. So when we start to look at then, widening the freeways, how do we want to think about that history of environmental racism? And the question of, are freeways really free? Who pays for them, and how do they pay for them? There's a school of thought and a body of literature out there which suggests that the way that we currently pay for our freeways, which is increasingly through sales tax measures as gas taxes decline, is actually an inequitable way to pay for this kind of infrastructure. And so that, by actually putting a price on the road, potentially you might be able to address some of those. It might be a more equitable way to pay for the uses of the freeway. Next slide. We also wanted to think about state and regional goals on climate change. And so, as this board knows, your MTP and Sustainable Community Strategy has greenhouse gas targets that you need to comply with. And the state also has, through their Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, really encouraged projects to think about using multimodal options, pricing strategies, and technology to optimize operations on freeways. In other words, just widening freeways. It should be done with kind of a broader set of tools in mind. Next slide. So in response to all of this, in June of last year, we wrote a letter to Caltrans and state leaders proposing a new vision for the project, that the new lanes should be toll lanes, not carpool lanes, and that the revenues from tolling should be reinvested in transit and transportation equity programs in disadvantaged communities in the corridor. And that the project itself should have some additional investments to prioritize transit and active transportation, including some of those things that you see here, along with some technology changes that allow transit vehicles to move more quickly on and off the freeway. So we wrote that letter in June, and then next slide. After many months of conversation in last October, we signed an MOU between our agency and Caltrans District 3, kind of codifying this new vision. And as part of that, then Caltrans headquarters recommended the project for state funding through the SB1 Trade Corridors Enhancement Program. Previously, this had not been a project that was prioritized for funding, but in support of this new approach, headquarters did make that recommendation, which we were very happy about. So we jointly applied for $103 million in state funding in December. And then, as Chris Doherty was just talking about, we were one of the many that also threw our hat in the ring for the transformative funding round. We asked for a $13 million grant to help close our funding gap to construct this, but then also to do some of the planning necessary to actually move forward the concept of tolling, to be able to actually begin to implement tolling in the Sacramento region. Next slide. So the total project cost is $387 million. We have a phase 1 project, which is a smaller, a subset of the total corridor. So it would be from the Richards exit in Davis to the 8050 interchange in West Sacramento. So it's most of the corridor, covers the whole causeway itself, but doesn't include the connections across the county lines. That's $232 million. We currently have about $92 million, in secured funding. And with the 2 funding applications we just told you about, that would fully fund our phase 1. The next slide. So just to wrap up, this is my last slide. This is where we are in our timeline. We're currently in environmental review. Construction would begin if we get our funding in summer 2025. With the lane set to open in 2027. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one struggling to clear their throat on this morning. Any questions from our committee members? I'll be slower in case the hands go up slower, or wave at me. Oh, I see one. Director Soon.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the information. And just curious, is there an intention to figure out the connections? Because I can just imagine that as you get across the Yola bypass, trying to get south on 5 or north on 5 or continue to 50 will be a nightmare.
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't touch on, part of what we're looking at. Oh, I am so sorry. Excuse me for 1 sec. This is what I get for doing a presentation when I'm still sick. We are looking at.
You actually should take care of yourself, by the way. I'm just going to point that out.
Thank you, Director Early. We are looking at potential direct connection between basically the express lane on 80 to get over to 80, so that people currently, if you're going eastbound, right, you have to go all the way to the right to get to stay on 80. So that is something we're exploring and will be part of the environmental document. And then as far as 50 and I-5, it's a great question. I don't know that at this point, and maybe Director Tacker from Caltrans can let me know if there is any thought about how kind of connections to I-5 would work in terms of express lanes, but that's not something I'm familiar with.
Would have to get back on that comment as well, Autumn. I'm sorry, can't help you right now.
That's okay, thank you. But yeah, I do think, I mean, we've got to continue it, right? Because you just move the congestion over a little bit and those connections will become a problem. But very nice to see this going forward. I, like many, get stuck on that that part of the freeway as well. I hope you feel better soon, Autumn.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got a quick one, Chair. Forgive me, I can't find anywhere that I can raise my hand on my buttons here. So Autumn, I'm curious, you said that this additional lane would be priced for some and free to others. How will that be determined?
It's a great question. Thank you. So we will go through what's development of what's called a toll policy ordinance, where we would look at things like, you know, are carpools, do carpools pay a discounted toll, or are they free? We would also look at, in some places, electric vehicles or clean air vehicles also get to use carpool lanes for free. So that would be another piece that we would explore. So those are the kinds of questions we would answer, but generally those are the two categories of vehicles where you see a discount. And of course, I should say transit vehicles as well. Buses tend to use these lanes for free.
All right, thank you.
Chair Gallardo, you're on mute.
When you, a great question, Director Joyner, because that was my curiosity too. I think we've all seen the electric vehicles have the opportunity for our carpool lanes, but as we know, sooner or later, everything's going to be an electric vehicle. So I'm wondering about if we jump into that now, or is that something you're going to phase through? And then when you mentioned the bus system, I'm assuming that means not just trans, but also the school bus system?
That's correct. Any buses, and that can include private buses and others, would use the lanes for free. And in terms of you know, the clean air vehicles question, that's something that we, you know, is not a decision that we're making at this time. That would be part of a, you know, once we have established a tolling authority, we would go through a robust public process to make those kinds of determinations.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other? Yes.
Christina did a very nice job just to set this up, and Autumn, thank you for your battling through your cold to give us this update, and Director Tacker, thank you for all the partnership on this project, because I think, as you have heard, I just want to reemphasize, this is really a sort of a first out signature project, right, in terms of a priced facility. And it's a big one. It's very high profile. So we kind of need to get it right. I mean, Director Soon, I appreciate your questions about going down to the 5, but also there's a possibility of thinking about, you know, the longer 80 corridor all the way through Sacramento and Placer as well. Director Sander will remember when he chaired the board in 2019, and we adopted a long-range plan remarkably ahead of schedule. And for the first time ever, we looked at tolling in the plan. And we realized that if we could get tolling right, not as a revenue generator, but as a way to set the price signal to move people more efficiently through corridors, we'll meet multiple goals. And so, believe it or not, Director Sander, I think on my last count, we now have 20 new board members that were not part of that adoption of the 2019 long-range plan. And so given that, we wanted to bring Autumn here, talk to you a little bit about this project so you have sort of a visual, right, and a case study. And then, as Christina said, we're going to move into a deeper board workshop in 2 weeks. We'll have 2 speakers and do a deeper dive into why tolling, what are we trying to get from it, you know, things to pay attention to. We want to get it right the first time out of the gate. So it is a very nice setup for that board workshop in March. Thanks.
Chair Gallardo, this is Lynette. I wanted to let you know that we do have public comment on this item. Would you like to hear that now?
That would be perfect. Thank you. We'll open public comment.
Okay, and this is Alan Hirsch with YOLO Mobility. Alan, you're now in the Transportation Committee meeting and can make your comments. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting project and possibly very innovative. It's a breakthrough project. And I think we're especially blessed, the environmental community, to have as a partner the YOLO Transportation Board, which is, and with Autumn Bernstein, who is an innovator. I've seen her resume. We're very fortunate to have that. And working with Caltrans, who's a little stickier, shall we say. Couple things I want to bring to your attention. The induced demand is really important. And the studies so far have been totally neglected Tahoe traffic, the corridor studies. That's a really issue. There's a myopia about peak hour traffic. And if you live in Davis, you know that the congestion from Tahoe is really important. The second is realize that I-80 will continue to remain a bottleneck. Under every scenario, it's always going to be a bottleneck. It's the Bay Bridge of our region. It constrains things. So if you want more cars flowing back and forth and more sprawl into Yolo County, you want more people traveling to Tahoe to speed the climate, this is the project that's going to do that. So any capacity we add here, whether it's tolled or free or carpool, whatever, it's just added capacity, adding VMT. We're moving backwards here. We add capacity. This is a very difficult one. I'm empathetic with you as electeds, but we need to change things. Status quo, again, reminds you that Highway 37 is going to have to be raised 20 feet to address climate change. This is real. Our children and our grandchildren deal with this thing. When are we going to deal with this thing? Second, on the alternatives analysis, transit alternative was not studied. Transit is just a mitigation. There was no, in the regional study, there was no regional bus service conceived in that plane. No region across county, across Soloto, Bay Area to Sacramento, it was not even conceived. They didn't even notice the flick bus in the study. It's really quite amazing, the narrowness of this. And the second thing, they did a cost study of upgrading the rail system, Capital Corridor, versus the cost effectiveness of studying the widening the freeways on I-80. And the rail upgrade was 3 times as cost effective as basically widening the freeway. That's Caltrans number. That's buried in their study, but there it is on page 69, I think it is. So, and also the second thing, we talk about, when Yolo County talks about equity, they're talking about equity for Yolo County residents, even though probably the majority of the people using this causeway are outside of the county. So you should be aware of this, and equity should be addressed as community-wide, not just Yolo County, in terms of using that toll revenue and facilitating this thing. This is a difficult project. I'm really very happy that we have Autumn and Yolo TD, which is an innovative transit agency involved with this thing, but this is a tough one and we can't slide back. We have a climate change crisis. Thank you for listening to me and thank you for grappling with this difficult project.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Is there any other public comment?
There's no other public comment.
Thank you. This is an information only item, so we will move on then to our next item. And this is going to be the carbon reduction program summary. And Christina, you will be presenting again.
Yep. Thank you so much. So we wanted to bring forward a discussion topic. It is the carbon reduction program funding. So this was a new program that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law in November of 2021. And it is just like our CMAQ and RSTP funds that we get from the federal government. This will come to SACOG as the MPO. To distribute throughout the 6 county region. So with the recent action that you all have taken with the corrective action, this money will need to be spread out across the 6 county region through a competitive process. So we've started to, now that we've kind of crossed that hurdle, we've started to think about what we should be doing with this funding. So I wanted to kind of just start the conversation today. And, you know, we have a lot more to discuss and there's no action, as you know, today, but there will be in the future potentially of what we are going to do with this money. So we're anticipating receiving about $4.2 million a year for this funding for a 5-year period. So it's a little over $22 million that we're expecting for those 5 years. So it is not a significant chunk of money, but it is a chunk of money that can go towards really important projects and advancing projects in the region. One of the really important points to note, and one of the reasons why we're bringing this to you now to start the conversation, is that the fiscal year 2022 funds need to be obligated by September of 2025, which really is not a lot of time. So we need to really start thinking, at least at the bare minimum, of what we might be doing with that first year of funding, and then we can come up with potentially a longer term strategy for the other 4 years and possibly beyond if this continues on. So we've started to think about potential strategies for how we could distribute it, and there's from a distribution standpoint, there's two options that we've been kind of toying with. And one is to combine this with the CMAQ and the RSTP funds in future funding rounds. We cannot do it in this current funding round that we're in simply because it's not a 6-county funding round that we're concluding right now. But in future years, we could do that. Alternatively, we could also, as we start to think through the funding round working group, we can start to think about whether or not perhaps a dedicated funding program to this funding source would make sense to advance projects that are listed as eligible projects in the Caltrans information that's available. I did provide a link to that in your staff report, so if you're interested to see, you can do that. But digging a little deeper and kind of looking at what is eligible, there's some clear existing programs and projects already underway that could benefit from this type of funding, specifically things like the RAISE funded program that we're about to kick off, the mobility zones, active transportation projects, which you just saw has a pretty significant need in our region for funding, as well as pricing. So some of the things that Autumn has just talked about in her presentation. So a little bit on each of those. The RAISE grant, as you know, funded the mobility zones project that will be starting here in a few months. And that was kind of designed as our potential carbon reduction strategy for the region. So in some ways it could be a potential good fit or natural fit for this funding specifically, because a lot of the projects that will be coming out at the county level that will be prioritized fall into those eligible categories. And those eligible categories are broken out into priority 1 and priority 2. And we suspect that many of the priority 1 eligible projects will be consistent with what comes out of that study. Another option, as I mentioned, was the Trails Plan implementation. We've just had a unanimous adoption of that last year. And those types of projects are given pretty strong priority in the carbon reduction program literature as well. We know that there's a lot of need, as I mentioned. There's also a lot of momentum with that. So it also seems like a potential good fit. And then, as I mentioned, the third priority could be advancing studies and further action related to tolling and pricing in the region. So we know YOLO 80 is sort of the first one out the gate, as James mentioned, but there are plans for I-5 and potentially State Route 99 and the whole 80 corridor. So there's more of this coming down the line, and so there will be there's a need to kind of do some more work, whether it's thinking about a tolling authority or coming up with more specialized plans to help advance some of these. There is work there. So this is really our first time out the gate on this to talk about this. We have spoken with PCTPA and EDCTC, our partners, and we'll continue to have conversations with them as we develop this and start to think more in detail. Again, now that this is a 6-county program, we really want to make sure that all of our partners are engaged and involved throughout the process. So we're looking forward to that. But in general, I think the theme here that we have with this this program is that we already have some great plans and we already have some great programs that are underway. What we really need is to work to take action and implement what has come out of those plans, and this could be one mechanism to do that. So an example would be using some of the funds for environmental phase, for example, for trails or something, for design to advance those so that we could set those up to be more competitive for larger pots of funding, particularly at the federal and state level, to get the capital needs that they need to take them farther. Because $4 million a year won't necessarily get you to construction, but it can really, really help a significant amount of projects move forward. So this is sort of, like I said, the first time we're talking about this and want to have a conversation and engage with you all about this throughout the way. So just throwing it out there, happy to answer any questions you might have about this. This will not be the first time you see this, so just know that.
Well, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Any questions from the committee members on this item? Not seeing any hands, very slowly look hands. Not seeing any, then we will check and see. Also, Lynette, is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do have public comment on this item. We have 2 comments. Would you like me to go ahead and let them in now to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay, our first commenter is Kevin Busey with the STA, Sacramento Transportation Authority. Kevin, you are in the meeting and you're welcome to make your comments now.
Good morning, directors. I've had a chance to talk with Christina about this, and one of my thoughts, just wanted to throw this concept out there, was that for this very first year of funding, we consider using the 6-county regional active transportation program list that was just awarded. There's a contingency list. You could utilize that list to fund environmental only, and that would help position projects for the upcoming active transportation program, Safe Streets and Roads for All, as well as other programs, including SACOG's next funding round. And it would take, I think it's about $4 million of funding for this first year, and it would allow those projects to get positioned. And it's very difficult to spread $4 million over a 6-county round. So this concept would take, let's say, about $500,000 for environmental. You'd be able to advance about 8 of those projects that didn't get funding. So that's just a concept I wanted to throw out there. Appreciate the chance to make the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Busey.
Our second commenter is Alan Hirsch with YOLO Mobility. Alan, you are in the Transportation Committee and able to make your comments now. You'll be limited to 3 minutes. Hi, Alan, if you can hear me, you're in the Transportation Committee. Yes.
Thank you. This $4 million is only $1.75 or $1.50 a resident for your cities. You can figure out how small that is if it's split up. I suggest you keep the biggest source of greenhouse gases is driving, and with carbon reduction, we need to shift people out of their cars, in gas cars, particularly, into alternate modes. So I suggest that behavior change is what this focus should be, and you should advertise about the shift to transit, shift to active modes to get behavior change, and talk about how more driving leads to driving. It's healthier. So healthier living, that would be a focus, and $4 million would go a long way in terms of a region-wide, especially with social media program. It would be a drop in the bucket for any concrete and steel projects and be kind of lost. So please consider an advertising program to do that, encourage behavior change to non-carbon intensive modes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
There's no other public comment.
Thank you. We'll close public comment. Any other questions or comments from our committee? All right, seeing none, we will move on to our next item. And item number 9 is the 2025 Blueprint update. And AJ, you are our presenter.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me, Chair. Yes, we wanted to bring a quick update on our efforts on Blueprint outreach. Now that we're getting into the thick of the matter of our kind of planning activities, we have I've summarized this for you in the staff item, but if I could just call attention to a couple things that we're doing either new or different, or that we're kind of launching into right now, is the first thing is on our focus groups, which is not necessarily a new activity, but a new way that we're doing it is we're including both English and Spanish focus groups. So there'll be 4 in English and then 4 in Spanish as well. Give you a quick preview of that. We did some scientific public polling with partnership with Sac State and Valley Vision. We've received those initial results. Staff here is really analyzing that and sort of threading the story of how that relates to a lot of these metrics that you'll be starting to receive through the pathways, for example. Very exciting. We've launched a grant program with community-based organizations. We have a commitment to do that for $50,000 a year. So the first one has launched. We've got 12 grantees. We've met with them. They're all very excited to start working through their audiences and membership to really sort of carry some of our message and build relationships that, as a regional agency, working directly with the public isn't necessarily the most, the best way to do that, and sometimes might actually get in the way of your local efforts in outreach. So that's our focus. While we do some direct outreach, speaking of which, we will be doing pop-ups, which I believe you saw in your executive director's update. While we're only required to do 8 of those across the region, we're committed to try to do one in every single jurisdiction this year. So those are coming up starting this spring and into the summer. I know James has asked, and we've mentioned, if you have favorite community events in your city or county, and you would like to see us at that particular one, we'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, we certainly have staff on board. Actually, just brought on 2 new interns the other day just to help us support these efforts. So yeah, any feedback you have on those would be appreciated. And then wanted to highlight, I think that Lynette has started to send out some calendar appointments for you for June 16th. We're going to have a regional workshop on the 3 pathways. As board members, this might be a little bit of a repeat in the information that you've been getting starting this month and the next couple months on the pathways. But we really wanted to broaden that audience out to include your peers on your councils and boards, your senior staff, our community-based partners, and have a 300-person workshop akin to what we did maybe 20 years ago in the original blueprint, to really dive into the details on that, build some ownership of the vision for the region, and then provide feedback back to you for the preferred scenario development. And then one last highlight is we did a round of presentations to all of the city councils and boards of supervisors that just wrapped up a few months ago now. We're going to do that again in the fall. And then, excuse me, we're going to do that next year. And then this fall, though, however, we're going to do county level convenings. So these are, if you've been through a MTP or blueprint cycle before, which James noted that maybe half the board has not, we are required to do a county level elected official meeting. However, the state requirements on that place those meetings at a time that's really difficult to actually receive feedback. It was a little bit more of a one-way communications channel just because it was so late in the process. So we're moving these up to really work at a kind of a sub-regional level, to work with you and your peers to dive into some of the strategies and stuff that we'll be introducing into the blueprint process. So yeah, that's my quick update on all of the many things that we're diving deep into right now for blueprint outreach. I'm happy to, if you have any feedback or ideas, I'm happy to hear it.
Thank you. Oh, yep. Any questions from our committee? Well, I think we're covered there. And Lynette, do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Gallardo, it looks like Director Early has a question or comment.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
I do. I will just real quickly. AJ, we have the bike rodeo in West Sac on April 30th. I think it'd be great for you guys to be able to do this pop up there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think as well, if anybody has any events coming up, I know I've got a couple in my mind too, so we'll send them off to you.
Appreciate that.
And
We've
then
got a wine fest coming up that I'm certain staff would thoroughly enjoy attending.
I'd say that it's lovely to see, this is another way to get the outreach. We get everybody out, right? I like it. Any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
All right, thank you. Our next, well, now as we are moving on, then I believe, well, we have our 12 o'clock our optional travel, but I also believe under other items, Christina, did you have something else that you wanted to share with us?
I do. This is not necessarily transportation related, but I do want to share it here. There is a ULI homelessness program that is going to be held March 23rd from, I think it's 8 to 10:30. There's going to be conversations on best practices and solutions around the state local programs that are succeeding, and then how to deliver transitional housing across the Sacramento region. So I just wanted to let you all know about that. There's 40 spots that are being held for elected officials in our region. So if you're interested, please check James's executive director's update. There's information there on who to contact and how to get involved in that. So thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Any other items? Anyone from the committee wanted to share, staff? All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate this great information today and some great conversation. We are going to have a little break in our committee meeting. And those of you that are able to stay with us, we appreciate that. We'll have our travel modeling review luncheon meeting at noon, and we will take a break in our committee meeting until we re-adjourn at 12.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.